Why go solar? Solar is better than ever. Our revolutionary design and inverter equipment with the latest in solar panel technology for the ultimate in-home and business security. That's right, I said security. Grid security and security of your home are linked. Fortify your future today with a battery backup system. No maintenance, quiet running. Did you know in Manitoba, grid-connected, off-grid, and battery backup systems are 100% right off in the year you purchase for any company or farm? Do you want to back up your internet, keep your tills running, and the lights on? We can install a system that is right for you with battery backup fully capable of taking on all those essential loads and keeping you running. When you call our experts at Evolve Green, ask about getting your free energy audit today. Call or email today to find out what system works best for you. 1-866-5EVOLVE or support@evolvegreen.ca. Also, be sure to check out our website at www.evolvegreen.ca.
You're not alone. If you need someone to talk to today, please contact Crisis Services Canada by either calling them at 1-833-456-4566 all hours of the day, or you can text them at 45645 at 4 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern Time. Remember, you're not alone, and Crisis Services Canada is here to help. Hello everyone, happy Monday, and welcome to this edition of the Coffee with Graeme Newscast here on ASTV Productions. I'm your host, Graham Forsyth. Today's episode is brought to you by Pure Nata, Fabricland Winkler, and Evolve Green. Lots to talk about in the WHL today. It's been a busy weekend in the league, and I'm going to be joined by Jonathan Hodgson to talk about the Saskatoon Blades season opening win from Saturday over the Swift Current Broncos, where they won that game 4-2. I'll have a chance to sit down with Jonathan to speak about the debut of Connor Bedard in Friday's game that they faced off against the Prince Albert Raiders in, and I'll also have a chance to ask Jonathan about where the Saskatoon Blades stack up in the WHL East Division this season. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll be right back with Jonathan and just highlights from Connor Bedard's debut, as well as a recap from the Saskatoon Blades season opening win after this commercial break. But first, a word from one of our official sponsors in Pure Nata here on this edition of the Coffee with Graeme Newscast. Stick with us. Welcome back to the Coffee with Graeme Newscast on ASTV. On Friday, 15-year-old sensation Connor Bedard made his WHL debut with the Regina Pats, and going in, there was a lot of hype on this kid. It was back in last March when he was given the right to have exceptional player status by Hockey Canada, becoming the 7th player in Hockey Canada's history to receive that honor and the first player in the WHL to receive that honor. And For the 2020 WHL Bantam Draft first overall pick, all eyes were on him in anticipation of what he'd be able to do, what he looked like. He belongs out there. How would he fare against older competition? Well, going up against the 2019 WHL champions, the defending champs of the league in the Prince Albert Raiders, the 15-year-old phenom was not only sensational, but I think it's safe to assume that it looked like he belonged.
And early on in this game, Bedard gets a prime scoring chance in front, but he ends up catching Max Paddock in the head with a shot. On this next sequence, the Raiders get rewarded on a hard-working shift with a goal from Ozzy Weisblatt, as that makes it 1-0 for Prince Albert. The Raiders would lead 2-0 going into the second period. Moving into the second period, the Raiders wasted no time extending their lead to 3-0, as Matt Cullen took a pass from Weisblatt and buried it for his first goal of the season. But after the Raiders took a penalty shortly after they extended their lead, Connor Bedard showed us what he was made of. An absolute beauty for Bedard's first career WHL goal, as his shot overpowered Paddock, but he wasn't done there. Just 48 seconds later, more magic from number 98. Another beauty from the 15-year-old, as that goal cut the Prince Albert lead down to 1. It wouldn't matter in the end though, as the Raiders would end up scoring 3 in the third and would take the win with a score of 6-3. Moving into Saturday's action, the Saskatoon Blades kicked off their season on the road against the Swift Current Broncos at the Brandt Center in Regina. The Broncos opened up the scoring a minute into the game with a goal from Raphael Pelletier. The Blades ended up outshooting Swift Current in the first period 13-6. Saskatoon's efforts would be rewarded in the second, as 6 minutes and 41 seconds into the frame, 2019 9th overall WHL Bantam draft pick Brandon Lazowski tied the game at 1 apiece. Later in that frame, Josh Davies would score for Swift to retake the lead. The score would remain 2-1 for Swift going into the third period. Going into the third, the Blades exploded offensively, scoring 3 unanswered to come back and take the opener 4-2.
Joining me now to talk about Saskatoon's huge win over the Swift Current Broncos is host of Behind the Mic here on ASTV, Jonathan Hodgson. And I know that he was at the post-game presser. He's going to have a lot more detail about what was talked in that press conference here in this interview. But Jonathan, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, Graeme. Thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun to be on with you. I've been having a blast over on Behind the Mic, so it's always good to get on and have some fun with the other hosts. So I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, it's exciting to have some live action in the dub finally.
Yeah, finally we get some action in hockey in these COVID times finally. And you know, there's a lot of great storylines, like Connor Bedard's huge debut, even though they ended up losing to the Raiders, but the guy put up 2 goals, and we're going to talk about that. But we're also going to just start off with talking about Saskatoon's win over Swift Current. And, you know, for Saskatoon, they start off the game by being down 1-0 in the first minute of the game. So what kind of happened from your point of view that kind of transpired into them giving up that early goal?
Well, you know what? It was 2 or 3 different games all in one, and it certainly wasn't pretty. I don't think you would expect anything to be pretty after almost exactly a year off since their last game before the shutdown last spring. But there were a number of key things that went on in that game this afternoon. As you mentioned, they were down 2-1 after 2 periods, and they seemed to be playing fairly well. They were out shooting Swift Current by a pretty wide margin. They just weren't being rewarded And in those first two periods, I think it took the Blades a little bit of time to, one, find their legs, and also two, get into some kind of a flow and get everybody activated in the game. Because in the first 25 minutes or so of that game, they took 4 penalties. Now they killed all of them off, but that makes it hard to get everybody in the game, get your top line forwards rolling. And then, as we'll talk about as it goes on here, some really good stuff happened for them in that final 20.
Yeah, and that was the biggest thing I noticed from that first period is they go and they outshoot the Broncos 13-6. They just couldn't buy a goal, and like you said, after having so much time off from last season to this season of not playing any competitive hockey for most of these guys. I know some of these guys played like in AAA leagues, stuff like that, and junior leagues as well. But it's nice to see that they finally got it rolling in the second period a bit, even though they ended up coming out of that period down 2-1. But that huge third period is what put them over the top, scoring 3 goals in that final frame, and they outshot the Broncos in all 3 periods. So as the game picked up, just as they got their legs under them, they finally got into the groove of things. What were the things that this Blades team was doing so well to really just neutralizing this Broncos team?
Well, I'll take you back to the second period when they were down 2-1. They had a power play that they didn't convert, and they also didn't send out last year's leading goal scorer, Tristan Robbins, and their second leading point scorer from a year ago in Cal Krnkovic. And then in the second period, in short order, both of those players got on the score sheet with their first 2 goals of the year. And Chase Waters, the third-year captain, also had a couple of assists. So I really liked, and they talked a little bit about it in the postgame, was I really liked how their big guns made an impact in a big spot there. And also someone that kind of surprised some. I don't think it surprised them internally, but they had head coach Mitch Love had Brendan Lazowski playing up on the top, playing up with, I should say, Chase Waters and 20-year-old Caden Daly. And Lazowski had 2 goals after playing in just a couple of games last year. So that was a huge boost.
Yeah, and I looked at it. Lazowski with 2 goals. He was a 2019 first-round pick. He went, I believe it was 9th overall in that draft. And for him to come out, have this type of production after in his first season only playing 2 WHL games, for him to do the types of stuff he was doing in this game, just how impressed were you by his performance?
Oh, it was outstanding, and he scored a couple of nice goals too. It wasn't just that they were
Yeah.
mucker goals. So that's gonna be important. The I'm not sure if he's gonna stay long term with Waters and Daly. And by the way, for Daly as well, to be playing beside Waters, who has been playing top 6 minutes and driving his own line for a couple of years. For Daly to be playing in that spot, that's good for him too. But they're playing without this year. They're playing without Martin Fasco-Rudis, who came over in a late season trade with the Everett Silvertips last year, and he combined with Robbins and Krnkovic on a really dynamic top line down the stretch for the Blades last year. He put up 10 goals and 18 points in 23 games. And the Blades, you take it back to last season, the Blades had a really slow first half. But really, after that Christmas break, they found their stride. The new wave of leaders really grew into their shoes, into their skates, so to speak, after the previous season's top 5 scorers all moved on, and they really made it their own team and started to make hay, and they had clinched a playoff spot. So bringing it back to today, and why I go to that after Lisowski did what he did, is they're going to need somebody to emerge, to be able to play with the big boys, and they might need somebody to become, a big boy. Maybe not like last year. Like I said, they had the 5 top point scorers from the previous season all not come back, so it was a big retooling year last year. Maybe not as much this year, but change is every single season in junior hockey. So to have a fresh face like that, show that he can produce and he can finish, that head coach Mitch Love is gonna put that one in the memory bank for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You got to think like Coach Mitch Love had to love what he was seeing from the team today, especially on that PK. Like you pointed to how they killed off a bunch of penalties in that one period, and they ended up killing off all 5 of the power plays that they went up against. Just what do you think was the biggest strength, or what do you think is the biggest strength of this Blades PK this season so far, from what you saw in that first game?
Oh, you know what? They had to put their work boots on right away. And, like I said before, that it might have been tough, might have made it tough to get the flow offensively and really, really engage on that end. I think it put them to work right away. And there's no time and space for Swift Current. And you know what? That might be a little bit of an awkward spot for the Broncos too, where sometimes it's not the easiest thing to have a power play at the very beginning or the very end of the period, because it's tough to get flow for a team. And Swift Current is probably still rebuilding. They probably haven't arrived yet. They're still putting it back together after going all in for the 2017-18 WHL championship run. But for them, it might have been a little tough. First game of the year, you've been off, like I said, for a calendar year. You're trying to figure out who's who, and you find yourself with 4 power plays that bring expectations. 4 power plays in the first 25 minutes. Before you've established any flow or any identity. So it might have been tough on both sides. But the Blades did a great job of setting a tone and setting a work ethic, and it served them well.
And you had a chance to tune into the post-game presser, and a lot of good stuff, I'm assuming, was said, even though this team started off slow. But they ended up out shooting the team in every single period. They outshot the Broncos in every single period. What were the biggest talking points from Coach Mitch Love in that presser that you saw?
You know what? I think we've already talked about 2 of the biggest ones, but I think something that came out from Mitch, came out from Lazowski, it came out from Waters, is just the excitement level there was for this game. And Mitch had talked about it before the season, where he said that the meal room and spaces where they have their limited ways to congregate with the safety protocols in place this year. He said, for example, the meal room is the loudest he has ever heard it. Normally, they just get in, get out, but he says the group is really buzzing. The energy in practice has been good. But what came out today was that they were excited to transfer that energy that they've been putting on their teammates in practice and finally get some live action and take it to a different color jersey. So I think, I think it was fun. Certainly a lot of stuff to work on. Mitch Love mentioned that the 5 penalties were something that they want to clean up, but they were happy to get back at it and shake out the legs a little bit. And then, of course, we've talked about Lazowski quite a bit, and of course, that third period with 3 goals, coming back from down 2-1 to win 4-2. I think that was more just them getting rewarded. Like you said, they were playing fairly well and carried play most of the day. But I think that was just one of those, put a crack in the wall kind of things, where they finally got rewarded in the third period for their good work.
Yeah, and one thing that I find so interesting, and I feel like it's kind of a given, is after so much time of not being able to play games, you're finally back on the ice. It's like these guys are buzzing, they're ready. And you think in a season like this, where nothing's guaranteed if the league's going to stay or not, with depending on if there's a bunch of positive cases that come back, stuff like that. Do you think this type of energy this Blades team is bringing, and I'm assuming for all the teams they'll be buzzing as well because they're so excited, do you think that's going to create a different type of factor in the game with that different type of energy that this team is bringing this year?
I think everybody is probably going to have a boost for at least the first weekend, and I think you're going to see really good energy and zip to the games. Certainly in the first weekend, which is this weekend for the East Division. But you're right, it's going to be something to watch as the season goes on. The Blades have 24 games in 47 days, which is very atypical of the WHL, where you typically play most of your games on weekends, and the school-age kids focus on school for most of the weekdays. And then you might have the odd Wednesday game or the very odd Monday game. So this is a very different situation. And you've got to remember that, there's some 20s out there that are a little bit older, a little bit more mature. There's a couple of guys around the league who have bounced back from NHL camps and temporary AHL loans. But there's a lot of kids out there. So to have them, I don't want to put it in a negative way, but they're kind of cooped up in their hotels, in whatever accommodations there are around the different divisions. That's a difficult test for some of these kids. So you're right. It will be interesting to watch as we get 3-4 weeks, a month into this thing, to see if there's some duds and some flat efforts later in the year. You hope not, but if we do end up seeing that from anybody around the league, it certainly wouldn't shock me.
And yeah, I forgot that there were some players, that had stints with NHL teams and camps, and players like, I know Seth Jarvis and Cole Perfetti were playing for their clubs in the AHL. But yeah, it's great to see that, we're finally seeing these guys, finally come together and get ready to, potentially go for a push to win that championship this season. So one more thing about the Blades, with the talent they have, like guys like Chase Waters and a guy like, Brandon Lazowski, guys like that really stepped up in today's game, and just the team in general. How do you feel like this Blades team is going to stack up with the rest of the competition in the East Division this year?
Yeah, they're going to be in good shape, I think. Like I said, last year was their big transition year where one core moved out and one core moved in. I think they accomplished that in the second half last year. So this year, I'm hoping, for their sake, to see them hit the ground running, and it looks like they may have done that with Tristan Robbins, the San Jose Sharks second rounder. And he, by the way, is just back from an American League loan. So they look to have their top line guys going. And defensively, they're going to need some guys to emerge. Probably Aiden Delagorge-Jean-Dier and Wyatt McLeod. McLeod was just brought in. They're probably going to need to play at the top minutes that were played last year by Scott Walford and Nolan Mean, who both aged out. But in terms of where they stack up in the rest of the division, this was a really tightly packed division last year. The top 4 teams were all within 8 points, and the Blades were moving up. But as far as I see it, Prince Albert Raiders are still the big dog in this division until somebody proves otherwise. They won the division last year, and of course, before that, went to the WHL Championship. And you look at the top end talent they bring back this year in Ozzy Weisblatt, the San Jose first rounder, Caden Gooley on the back end, the Montreal first rounder. And then they also bring in a veteran goalie in Max Paddock, who formerly played for Regina. So in my mind, they're locked and loaded still. Yeah, they're the team to beat. Other teams I look at, Winnipeg might be interesting. They have of course Peyton Krebs, who starred with Canada at the World Juniors and is just back from a stint with the American League affiliate of the Vegas Golden Knights, where he was a former first-round pick. And last year, after he came back mid-season from an Achilles injury, a partially torn Achilles suffered just before his draft day a year ago, he had 60 points last year in just 38 games. So to have him on board for all 24, that instantly makes them interesting. And they also have Connor Geekie, who is the younger brother of Morgan Geekie, who is, of course, now with the Carolina Hurricanes. So Winnipeg is interesting. Swift Current and Moose Jaw probably still building their way back up after going for it a couple of years ago. And as I'm sure it is still on your rundown here today, Regina, they lost their opener 6-3, as you alluded to Prince Albert. So as a team, they're still probably in that retooling stage, but Connor Bedard makes them must watch every night.
Yeah, it's crazy to have a 15-year-old in this league. I mean, the 7th player to get exceptional status from Hockey Canada and the first player to get it in the WHL. And for him to put up the production he did in Friday's game, I'm not going to say I was surprised by it, but honestly also surprised because it's a 15-year-old. But it's Connor Bedard, right? But for Winnipeg, like, I had a chance to interview Connor Geekie, what he did in his years of playing in the AAA league here in Manitoba for Yellowhead was sensational. His experience, even though he had 7 games last year, I think was huge for him, and him getting to play some games in the MJ this year was huge as well. And then you can't forget about a guy like Carson Lambos on that back end too, right? He's absolutely phenomenal too. A good old Winnipeg boy as well. So it's sweet to have some good old boys from Manitoba on this Winnipeg Ice team. I think that's pretty awesome. But I'm just going to transition now into talking about Connor Bedard with you. The guy was sensational, as we've alluded to in his WHL debut, putting up 2 goals in that game against the Raiders. And even though they didn't get the win, you gotta think it's the start of something promising for this kid in the league. Just from the highlights that you saw, I mean, there were the dangles, the shots. Just what do you think was the most impressive part of this 15-year-old phenom's game in his WHL debut with the Pats?
Well, obviously, if anybody's seen the highlights or watched the game on the streaming service, the goals were goal scorers' goals, and also the stage presence too, scoring twice in 48 seconds. scores his first career goal.
Yeah.
Coach puts him right back out there, and he does it again. So the kid's got a little bit of chutzpah for a 15-year-old. And the consensus, seeing the reaction from broadcasters and hockey types that were either broadcasting the game or were watching the game, is that he looked like a veteran. He didn't look like a 15-year-old kid who was, dipping his toe in the water. There didn't appear to be any timidness. He was there to play, and the skill, like you said, the release. That really strikes me on his goals. The release is lightning quick. The hands are great. The foot speed is there. He looks like he belongs at the top end already. And that is a really scary thing for the rest of this East Division hub this season. But for a hockey fan, it's really exciting. So there's definitely a lot to look forward to there for Pats fans as we go forward into his career, as we hopefully have fans being able to watch him in person, hopefully beginning next season.
Yeah, and I think that was probably the biggest thing I took away from it too. It just looked like he belonged out there. And as a 15-year-old, it's insane. And it's also insane that he's only 15. He's going to get better. He's only going to get better, which is kind of a nightmare scenario for teams. But,
I think that on your note there, I think the biggest thing that you see with junior hockey players year over year that get, they become more and more part of things and more comfortable, the biggest thing is he's going to get his man strength yet. We talk about his approach to the game and his impact on the game being veteran-like already. But like I was saying in other aspects, these are still kids, and no more so than Connor Bedard. He's doing stuff like that based on his God-given ability. Give him 2 or 3 years to, get to the same, get to his draft year and put on strength and have some experience, and that man strength that I was talking about. Once he starts getting a little more physical, little more physicality, it's going to be scary when you combine the skill with a little more strength.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm noticing the time now of this interview with you. We're way past 20 minutes now, and we got a whole newscast to do. So I'm gonna let you go after this question. For Bedard, I'm pretty sure the only place he played in before playing in the WHL this season was in Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. Just how do you think the experience of him going overseas to get experience playing in a league like they have in Sweden has helped him transition into playing in the WHL in terms of just him having his conditioning already there and just having some games under him?
Yeah, I think that was huge. And I think the biggest thing about that was he got a chance to play with older competition and at least work out and practice regularly with players who were older and bigger than him. So like we were talking about before, maybe this transition into playing games in the WHL, maybe it's not such a big deal for him after spending time over in Sweden. So I think, that's going to really serve him well to accelerate his adjustment to it. He definitely looked like he hit the ground running here this weekend, and I'm sure that was a big part of it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Coffee with Graeme Newscast here on ASTV. I want to sincerely apologize to everybody for not being able to finish this episode like I wanted today. I was going to bring you guys another bunch of news stories that we haven't covered today in terms of the latest stuff that's been going around here in Canada involving amateur sports, as well as talking about the latest university commitments that have happened from the MFHL as well as the SFU18AAAAHL. But I'm going to be honest with you guys, I didn't manage my time very well, and I was unable to get these news stories done for you guys. By the time I finished recording this episode, I'm going to be honest with you, it was 3 a.m. And it's something that, I always stay up this late editing episodes, but I've never run into a situation like this. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't manage my time well at all. And that's the biggest downfall of why you guys aren't seeing any more content in today's edition of the show. But moving forward, I'm going to try my best to do better to manage my time. It's something that I really gotta strive to get better at, and for your guys' sake, next week, I promise you, I'm gonna promise this right now on air, that you will get exactly everything that I said you would in the promos of next week's edition of the Coffee with Graeme Newscast, and just all the other episodes here on the network going forward that have to do with Coffee with Graeme and the Prospect Show. But yeah, I hope you guys can forgive me, and I hope that you stay and keep watching Coffee with Graeme and the Prospect Show, and just every show here on Amateur Sports TV Productions in general. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's edition of Coffee with Graeme, the Coffee with Graeme Newscast. I've been your host, Graeme Forsyth. Special thanks to Jonathan Hodgson for joining me on the show and being my guest today and talking about the WHL. Special thanks to you, the viewer, for sticking with us and watching all the way through up until this point in today's episode. And also a special thanks to our lovely sponsors in Pure Nata, Fabricland Winkler, and Evolve Green. I'll be back on the network tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Central Time to give you guys the second part of the Madison Glenn interview from last week's edition of the show. Senior forward of the Battlefords Sharks in the Saskatchewan Female U18 AAA Hockey League. But if you guys don't see me in tomorrow's episode, until the next time you do see me, I've been your host, Graeme Forsyth, signing off now. Stay safe out there. Have a good one. Go outside and enjoy that spring weather too. Hey, and until next time, I'll see you later. Peace out, guys.